This is Blame It on Vanity, chapter 19, and I'm also going to squeeze in chapter 20. This is the beginning of chapter 19. Chapter 19 is called Lassoed. This is her and Prince. Okay, so again, this is chapter 19. Two tickets were placed in my hands for the American Music Awards and happily received with all the girlish expressions of wow and wee and yippee as anyone would expect. This I anticipated would be the very place my dreams might awaken to reality. I checked my lipstick, that having been my greatest contemplation, the perfect shade of color, and hoping it lasted longer than the nails past my fingertips. I rushed towards the big red theater doors and enthusiastically claimed my seat. I was entirely captivated and my heart burst its way through my chest when my eyes glanced across the spacious, sparkling auditorium. It was all lit up with gigantic spotlights beaming across the legendaries. Ushers busily rushed them to their red velvet cushioned seats while the guests whispered behind their personal invitation cards. I had only hoped no one would notice me shaking and peeking over my shoulder 1,000 times. I was pretending to know someone, anyone, only to catch a glimpse of the who's who. Has my curls fallen? Is my mascara dripping from sheer excitement? So many sparkling faces, cameras and lights, and did I mention glamorous clothes? However, it was when I was led to the ballroom that I recollected a picture that describes 1,000 words. So why not join them, me and my long-stemmed golden shoes with heels to exhaust myself? My stilettos were so very ready to be exhaled, having walked 1,000,000 miles around the room. My mouth was agape, my ears turned up, and arms went flailing and flickering about like a baby butterfly. I was desperately looking for a place to land, yet trying to poise taller than 5'4". Naturally, I assured myself that the dazzling and sparkling diamond crown would soon fit the top of my tiny head. Very soon the lights would sparkle in my direction, whilst my chariot of galloping horses would race me home past the tall trees and beckon me through my castle's gate. I was a queen bee living in my own head and positively under my own deleterious spell. I was floating dizzily atop my over-the-top delirious delusions of magnificence. There I stood, speculating, has anyone noticed me in their peripheral vision? And there stood a young man awaiting my smile with a short fishing line and a very large hook in his hand. Surely thou knowest his name. After he executed, let me say that again. There I stood speculating, has anyone noticed me in their peripheral vision? And there stood a young man awaiting my smile with a short fishing line and a very large hook in his hands. Surely thou knowest his name. So you guys know who she's talking about. After he executed and I digested his most strange, intellectual, articulative, poetically astounding verbal quest for communication, I yielded. I can't pretend it was no surprise what took place within the more than minute meeting, which indeed he cleverly confiscated and I thoroughly enjoyed. Cameras were hovering about, honing in, interrogating for impressive subject material. I, somewhat confused, much like the Great Fall of Babylon, from the semi-automatic, bombastic explosion of questions directed at the gentleman on my right, but I can only recall one that mattered. Who is the lovely lady, Prince? Was he really talking of me? Grabbing tight my hand, yanking me closer to his side, he replied defiantly, "This is my wife." We parted awkwardly, that being the controversial conversation for the evening, I suppose, without the smooth I do attached. And before I could catch my breath, going forward and looking back with eyes wide open, a singer toting the name of Rick James stopped by the cameras, caught hold of me as I sauntered by, and muttered the very same words. They soared past my head, whizzing like a boomerang. Meet my wife, everyone. Some might say this could only happen in the movies. With the most auspicious playwright and classical set design, it just might work. What a life-stopping, slap-me moment, I thought. Well, that will never happen again. No one ever finds themselves in the exact position of a second time, do they? All in all, my crystal carriage turned back into its pumpkin, and someone stole my sugar-coated glass slippers, using them as a chew toy. 'Tis all the knights fell off their horses, lassoed in a great escape, going north to the next party. And so it was time to make my great escape a simple game of dodgeball, a disappearing act, an adios, and exit stage laugh. He. Okay, so chapter 20 is short, so I'll read this too. Heart's Eraser is the name of chapter 20. His voice was smooth and gently mysterious over my phone on the eve of that very warm California night. He was memorably apologetic without actually apologizing, for I must say he caught me sleeping. I had met no man like him, unsolved though he was, and oh so romantically intelligent. I fell in love with this young genius, and to the best of my understanding, he fell in love with me. You might say that scripturally it sounded like a great deal of falling, but I held on to my reckless roller coaster of a ride until I was dizzy and out of breath, and then I bought another ticket to ride. One usually anticipates one's future, and most certainly visions of grandeur had taken place. Thus, like-minded, both he and I were well determined to yank these visions through to reality. I, then being so extremely gullible and chipper than a hummingbird, had no idea what yellow brick road I was about to venture on, or where this young man's colossal carriage ride might take me. Nonetheless, I packed up my bags and headed for Minneapolis, skidding rubber tracks behind me. I went on chasing an ocean of dreams because chance was always screaming out my name and I couldn't help but pursue. From sun up till sundown for 6 months, we rehearsed exactly which way our legs would kick, a talent per se, and our heads would bop. I was delighted until it came time to meet the steel pole, Mr. Microphone. Intimidating to say the least, this long, strange, dead metal pole staring me cold in the face, daring me to step up and take control. Being only 20-something, not quite old enough for the show, 30-something, and with very little experience other than a runway, I must confess my shameful interests were bound only by the likes of fame and the flimsy green paper that folds and crinkles when you walk, and oh, the exhilaration of changing the I cans into the I did. Was I afraid of the stage? Without a doubt I was terrified, but you lose that fear after you've ripped a few hundred times and realize the floor won't disappear without you. Up pops a new day with new mistakes, mountainous challenges, and catastrophic proportions of craziness. Tracks were laid at the threshold of each daring day, and I awoke to the repetitive sound of a single bass synthesizer drumbeat beating for hours in my head. A perfectionist from the root to the branch he most certainly was. There he sat, staring incessantly at his paper with pencil in hand and rubber duster falling to the floor. He had all the internal energy that one could only imagine, leading to his incontestable destiny during that season of rehearsing and gathering of the bands, which included the Time, Vanity 6, and the Prince entourage. The dressmakers, the makeup and the hair, the bodyguards, lights, equipment, roadies, and the 9,000 interviews and 60 million photographers. We were bussed across America for the 1999 tour. It is a lovely thing to live courageously if courage is found to be an integral part of truth in one's life. But such was not my case, as the telling of my age was a lie. My height, my name, But such was not my case, as the telling of my age was a lie, my height, my name, my place of birth, and most anything that stood in the way of my progression. With time, I learned when introduced to the lens of a telescopic camera, the mouth inadvertently dwindles away, twisting perpendicular, habitually teaching the hands a relaxed way to exude a practiced lie, and that with expertise. It struck no mad slashing chord in me, however, cleverly vocalized that became, for my heart was somewhat vexed and speech detestable, grievously unturned, and my courtesy as well had most defiantly died and departed. I pressed my way through a carnal, listless future of which looked glamorous without regrets, though sporadically inwardly distressing, especially when my love was found playing in other playpens. Let me read that part again. She's telling you a little bit about her and Prince. The words that she used are kind of not confusing, but they're just, I don't know how to explain it. So if I sound a little weird, just rock with me. I pressed my way through a carnal, listless future of which looked glamorous without regrets, though sporadically inwardly distressing, especially when my love was found playing in other playpens. I was an instigator of change, and shall I say, when my bolts were finally loosened in Holiday City, I wanted to do everything I possibly could and do it all in a day's breath, my quest for self-significance. Help me. This is the end of chapter 20. This is a picture of herself. Vanity was so beautiful. Look at those cheekbones. Prince said she was the finest woman in the world, and she knew she was. Okay, so that was chapters 19 and 20.